Yes, good neighbors, good people. Jennifer Bushman is the co-founder and executive director of FedbyBlue, a nonprofit founded to amplify the importance of responsibly sourced foods from water. She is a sustainable seafood expert, communicator, and strategist who has been championing this for more than 2 decades. She is on a mission to transform the food system, preserve the oceans, and nourish the world with responsibly sourced foods from water. Food leaders such as the James Beard Foundation and the International Association of Culinary Professionals have recognized Jennifer's culinary contributions as groundbreaking in terms of palate experience, health benefits, and climate impact. Because Jennifer believes that policy change-making is as important as what we put on our plates, she sits on the boards of numerous ocean advocacy organizations, among which is Alexandra Cousteau's Oceans 2050 and the Marine Mammal Center. Welcome, Jennifer.
It feels like a contradiction. We must save our oceans, and we must also feed ourselves. But there are people all over the world trying to do both.
I had no idea that urchin diver was a job. Smile.
We can't really separate protecting the environment from human society. We're part of it.
I'm no environmentalist. I'm just from the community.
You know, who in their right mind would raise saltwater shrimp in the state of Minnesota?
There's so many other places like this. They're waiting for us to, wake them up.
But in order for you to keep enjoying the riches of the ocean, you're going to have to also be a friend of the ocean.
What we're hoping is that we'll be able to help indigenous peoples change their relationship with the sea.
Sustainability is to sustain, to extend life, not just of the fish or the natural resource, but of us.
Sometimes I think we should burn it all down, right? But this is what we've got, and we can make it ours.
As humans, as close to our DNA as we possibly ever could be, we have been storytellers. It's how we connected with one another. It's how we still connect with one another. We passed those stories on from generation to generation. I know in my own family, it was through those stories in the kitchen with a handful of incredible Jewish women that I learned about who they were, how they connected with the world around them, and the stories that they told of those foods on their plates left a lasting impression with me. And we still learn through storytelling. If I were to say to you, a wand-wielding wizard that was trying to protect the world, both the Muggle world and the wizardry world, you would know exactly who I was talking about, right? If I were to say to you that there was a mother who had a special child who was sending him off into the world and said, life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. You would immediately know exactly what I was talking about. I sit in a world where I have been talking about, and many, many other more influential people, about climate, about the importance of foods from water. And I can tell you that if facts and figures and charts and graphs were going to work, they sure as hell would have done so by now. You all sit at this incredible intersection of storytelling. Whether it's that you're telling a story to your child, or you're telling a story through your magazine and through this incredibly tight-knit community of the Edible Communities magazines. We know that we can create change through storytelling. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how important it is, this foods from water thing, and why it is so special that we are here in the state of Maine, in Portland, Maine, at the intersect of probably one of the most important states in terms of the development and the examples of what we can be in a blue food system. So we say blue foods, and we're in Maine, and we're not talking about wild Maine blueberries. We are talking about foods from water. And those foods from water are from the lakes and the streams and the ponds and all of the water environment, both fresh and marine. And it's the vegetables and the algae, the fish and the seafood that comes from it. It's the thousands and thousands and thousands of years of heritage where the reason why you need those long-chain EPA, DHA, omega-3s is because we were a people that ate foods from water as some of our primary sources of food. Again, both freshwater and marine-based, throughout our entire history of humanity. In fact, I would argue that our waters have been acting as the most important food bank in the world throughout history and throughout time. Because if you live near water, you still have the ability to go out and fish for your dinner. And this is a resource that not only have we become dependent on, but so have billions of people across the planet. You may not know it, but 3.2 billion people on the planet rely on foods from water as some part of their nutrients every day. Nearly 800 million rely on it as some part of their economy. That includes you, if you're writing about it. That includes the fisherman that's out on the water, and that includes the water farmer that's creating important solutions as we face some of the most important issues that we have in our food system moving forward. In fact, aquaculture is so important, a little bit of a running theme today, that the FAO from the UN, in their Fisheries and Aquaculture Report, have designated as the most important source of protein that we will have on the planet in 2050 when we reach 10 billion. So it's not an if, it's a when. And so how do we come together to show the importance of foods from water? And how do we do it in a way that really supports what's going to be the best for our future food system? And how do we stand in front of you and say, if you're not creating a narrative that includes foods from water, then you're actually dismissing the majority of the people on the planet that think it is so significantly important, even in our own backyard. When I come to the state of Maine, I am moved beyond words. It's why we featured it in the docuseries Hope in the Water. It's also why we featured the state of Hawaii, places where there's honor for heritage and the thousands of years of indigenous communities that have been working on the water, living in balance with that nature. It's where, when we move into the future, we have an alignment where fishers and farmers of water are working together to support a resource that really is so interdependent on one another. And where, with that wisdom, we look at what we're able to do in the future. So when we talk later in the panel that we're going to have at 2:15 about what are these intersects and how do we create this cooperation that goes all the way from the water to the plate, we can tell these stories, we can bring these people together in gatherings like this, because at the end of the day, as Dune so eloquently from Native Conservancy says, we are all indigenous to planet Earth. And in the series, an amazing man from Puerto Rico, Raimundo Espinosa, says, the greatest risk to conservation is poverty. And we will absolutely eat the entire bowl of popcorn in our ocean if we don't have alignment between how to utilize wild resources and also farm them in a way that's responsible and future forward. I showed you the trailer for Hope in the Water because I wanted you to know kind of what our journey was at FedbyBlue. I've worked in this space for nearly 20 years. And my sort of connection with it is maybe not unlike a lot of yours, where I came from a family that was fourth generation family ranchers in rural Colorado. And I always say I fell in love with two fish, and one of them was that great rainbow trout that my grandfather used to catch on the rivers of Colorado that ran through his ranch. And I saw that balance in nature where he had his beautiful farmed goods and he also had those great wild resources. And then a fish farmer called me and said, we're going to raise the most sustainable fish, and we think that there might be a way to be able to tell that story that's going to relate to something that people can connect to. Because as Barton said, part of the problem with this new food system is it's a little bit like, I'd say it's a little bit like sending your kids off to college. You know, you've got like all of this new stuff, this whole new world out there. You're making all kinds of bad decisions when you get there. And then all of a sudden you graduate from college and you realize it's time for you to grow up. You might take your time, but it's time to get a job, maybe have a family, and begin to figure out what your contribution is going to be. And I think that aquaculture and how we manage fisheries all are starting to come together to be able to do just that. How are we going to grow up and do better in the exact same way that you have seen in farming on land? Just like it's possible to farm a chicken well and farm a chicken badly, the same is true in fish and seafood. And one of the reasons why we decided that we needed to be able to tell those stories, and why out of pure necessity, my two co-founders and I founded FedbyBlue, was because we're not often able to hear those positive stories, factually based, scientifically based stories, but in a way where you would seek out great fish and seafood, stories of the fisherman, stories of the water farmer, and really be able to put your words in your publications, but also your dollars where your values are, in the exact same way that you've done in shifting the rest of so many parts of our food system here in the United States. So how is it, I would ask all of you, we have a food system, when well managed, between wild capture fisheries and sustainable regenerative aquaculture, that we are at a seafood deficit in the United States? You heard that statistic. I mean, 20 pounds is actually pretty generous. NOAA's latest statistics were that we're only eating 16 pounds of seafood per person per capita in the US at the moment. We eat 35 pounds of avocado, to give you sort of an thought here. One of the lowest carbon footprint in any of even its worst forms, lowest carbon footprint in terms of its sustainability standards, and highest nutrition. I mean, there's a reason why, you're supposed to eat those 2 to 3 servings of fish per person per week. And yet, I hate to say it, but that's a narrative that has been really generated through groups like the American Heart Association, and therefore into a boomer generation. And now these younger generations, it's not being passed on. Even in Japan, seafood consumption is lowering. So here we have a place where we can really fight nutritional injustice. And we're sitting at this intersect in the state of Maine, where we know we can produce more of it in the US, we know we can raise the fish well, we know we can protect wild capture fisheries well, and yet those stories aren't being told. And we've all sort of gotten used to, post-COVID, of doom scrolling. We're in really big trouble when it comes to documentaries and docuseries because of the fact that studios aren't interested in actually showing these series. Funders aren't interested in funding them anymore, and the reason why is because as much as you cry and as much as you are mad when you watch something, it does not change consumptive behavior. It's just like all those statistics on climate movement, it's not changing behavior. But we know through edible communities, we know through the work that has happened through chefs and showing plates and gorgeous examples where we can there's this great example that I use all the time. It's sort of like, and Disney applies this, it's called the floaters and swimmers and divers theory, where, the floater sort of rides the ride, goes to the theme park, goes to the attraction, and enjoys it, and then off they go on to the other ride. And the swimmer is the one that rides the ride, and Walt would say, notice that old Mickey was on the wall, and then goes off and has a great time, had a little bit of knowledge. And the diver rode the ride, saw that it was old Mickey on the wall, and saw that the shoelaces were wrong. in our food system and in our writing and in all of the things as we do outreach to engage, we all have to appeal, as Walt says, to the floater, the swimmer, and the diver all at the same time. So in seafood, the way we look at it is if you go to an indigenous restaurant with Chef Stephen Phelps and you have this great dish and you enjoyed it, way to go. But if you engaged with the waiter and you said, I'd really love to know where this shrimp came from, the waiter already has the education to say there's this incredible shrimp farm off of the coast of Florida. We get this shrimp locally, and we're here to support local water farmers. And the diver says, okay, I want to know if it's Aquaculture Stewardship Council certified, and I want to look for and have you give me the certification numbers to be able to prove it. All different ways of engaging through storytelling, through information, to be able to engage all of parts of your audience. At FedbyBlue, what we thought was, it wasn't that great work wasn't being done on the water. You've heard examples of this, and you're going to continue to hear examples of this as we make our way through the afternoon. They exist. But how many times have you watched, and we all have reverence to Sir David Attenborough, but how many times have you watched Blue Planet and the only thing they talk about in relationship to seafood is bad commercial fishing practices? Bad practices. The only way I can protect the water is if I don't eat fish and seafood. I'm on the board for the largest marine mammal science center in the world, and imagine how they felt when I came and said, you better get on board aquaculture if you want anything left for the whales to eat. Very controversial. But now there's an organization founded by EDF that's helping support an aquaculture bill, bipartisan support in the United States, and the Marine Mammal Center is on that board with them. It's a different way of looking at it because we can find good stories. We can give people stories of hope, and especially in a world right now where there's a lot of negatives surrounding them. We have to have something that we can grab onto. It's human nature. You've got to be able to somehow put something sweet in our mouths to be able to help the medicine go down. That spoonful of sugar, right? So at FedbyBlue, what we endeavored to do, and we've only really just begun, and we're humbled, believe me, by this process, is that we decided that we wanted to form a nonprofit that was actually going to start explaining and educating around the importance of foods from water. That there had to be some sort of an organization that was scientifically grounded. So our group is the Blue Food Assessment. If you don't know who they are, they're a group of scientists from Stanford University and the University of Stockholm and Eat Lancet that have proven the science behind, if I say 3.2 billion, then it really is 3.2 billion that rely on some sort of nutrients from water every day. And that science group has written scientific papers in Nature and Science Magazine and a number of others, all showing that there is an important climate change resilient food system that we can build around foods from water. So that was our first thing, was you're never going to believe us if it's not science-based. And then what we did was we started to gather all different thought leaders in the space, both on the academic side as well as the thought leader side, the nonprofit side, so groups like WWF, Native Conservancy, and a number of others, EDF and others, to make sure that we had sort of socialized all of the work and that we had the endorsements and support of all of those efforts. And then our first foray into this was Hope in the Water. It took almost 3 years. It took a full year to convince PBS that the science was correct to be able to finish the series and have it air on PBS. And we chose PBS as our partner for a number of reasons, mostly because we wanted you to have access. So while FedbyBlue owns the series, and that's very important, it's also the fact that we wanted access to be to everyone and anyone who had it and not have it hidden behind a paywall. Because even when we spoke to Nat Geo Disney, they wouldn't allow us use of name for Hope in the Water. Barton Seaver and Andrew Zimmern next September have a cookbook coming out called Blue Foods Hope in the Water, which was generated through our nonprofit. So you get the idea. You have to have the ability to build upon it and create momentum and celebrity and all of those things behind it. Every celebrity that's in the series is doing the work on the water. So believe it or not, Martha Stewart was already with her home in Maine supporting all of these different efforts on water and putting donations in and supporting the use of seaweed and fish and seafood all throughout her content. Shailene Woodley, who's in the series, we're very lucky to have her. She was already doing the work, rescuing and taking out zombie urchins, purple urchins, out of the water off the coast of California in Santa Barbara to help save the kelp forest. There's a great story, and I wanted to, I can't remember the woman who was from Puerto Rico, but this unbelievable story about Hurricane Maria hitting the island, and of course, World Central Kitchens famously coming in and feeding people. But what most people don't know is there was a group that they founded and had grants that was called the Food Producers Network. And in the series, we highlight a fisherman who applied for a grant through the Food Producers Network, had to take training on how to fish more responsibly, got responsible fishing gear, and actually is fishing in a well-managed fishery for giant squid. Baratunde Thurston and Jose Andres are part of that story. We felt like we could build momentum off of that storytelling. So I'll give you an idea, because our goal was not to just tell the stories, have you weep, think about maybe buying sustainable seafood or not, and then move on. We wanted this series wrapped like a warm blanket around the impact. So the first thing was, let's make sure that we have the biggest moment we could, with all the celebrities and the nonprofits and PBS putting a lot of time behind it. We did a 25-foot blue carpet Hollywood premiere with all the celebrities. Docs don't do that, Jennifer. Don't put your nonprofit money towards that, Jennifer. That's a waste of money, Jennifer. And then after that, 135 articles were generated about the series, I think, and counting, right, Daphne? In the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, People magazine wrote about the series because they were on the blue carpet. So that worked. Check that box. Retailers and restaurants all over the country have been popping up doing campaigns around it, because we thought if we brought celebrity to this and they could amplify the things that were on their menu that were responsibly sourced fish and seafood, they would be able to generate more sales. So those are programs that we're working on. The cookbook that Barton is producing with Andrew Zimmern. Putting Hollywood behind it. One of our collaborators is a Mainer, who is the most prolific writer and producer in Hollywood, David E. Kelley. Big Little Lies, The Undoing, L.A. Law, Ally McBeal, who is also, by the way, the largest trout farmer in the United States. David E. Kelley and his wife, Michelle Pfeiffer, are the largest. They're responsible for 80% of trout produced in the U.S., green-rated, responsibly sourced out of Idaho. So now you start to get the idea. We have the most important food system, or one of the most important. It's going to be contributive in the future. No one's eating it now. We're not socializing that through kids. So the next piece was we wanted the material to be accessible through schools. And about a month ago, right, Daphne, we launched in 90% of schools in the United States, grades 6 through 12, with PBS Learning Media Toolkits around education through STEM and career education. Because when Imani and Zeke talk about the fact that we need to build a broader and much more deep career development in these jobs on the water as we're losing people on the water, it all starts through education. And in places like Maine, WWF has supported things like Kelp Classroom through the MAIC and many other people that are working on really socializing this from the ground up. And that all starts with trust. So what I will tell you today is this. We are at an intersection. We are standing on a crossroads, one that aligns water protection with water production in service to our future of food. I'm telling you, we've earned that seat, and we hope you'll all support it. Thanks so much.